It started with a bark. Not just any bark, but the kind that tore through stillness like a thunderclap, loud, primal, and impossible to ignore. On what had begun as an ordinary Wednesday morning, Mrs. Carroll's 7th grade art class was buzzing with soft conversation and the swish of watercolor brushes when Dante, a retired German Shepherd K9, lunged toward a painting on the far wall. One moment the students were immersed in sketching childhood memories. The next chaos erupted. Paint cups spilled, brushes clattered to the linoleum floor. Screams rang out as desks scraped across tile in a scramble for cover. And at the heart of it all stood Officer Daniels' frozen, mid-reach eyes, locked on the dog he'd known better than anyone. His instincts told him to restrain Dante. But something deeper, a tug in the gut, held him back. The dog wasn't attacking randomly. He wasn't panicked. He was focused. And that painting was no ordinary canvas. It had always hung in room 114, mounted high on the east wall, towering and somber. Nearly floor to ceiling, the piece depicted a tattered American flag waving in a barren landscape. Dark silhouettes of soldiers stretched across the canvas like ghosts from another time. Most students avoided looking at it. It had a way of staring back. But Mrs. Carroll, with her soft voice and quiet sadness, insisted on its importance. It's a piece of history, she often said, her words gentle but unyielding. For years, no one questioned the painting, until Dante did. It was only 10 minutes into class when it happened. The kids were settled, dipping brushes, laughing softly. Dante had been lying near the back of the room next to Officer Daniels, as always. Then he stood slowly, deliberately, and walked toward the painting. Daniels barely glanced up at first, assuming it was a stray lunch wrapper or the scent of a squirrel from recess. But then Dante's growl began low and building like a rumble beneath the earth. It rose until it filled the room with dread. Daniels called to him softly, "Dante, no." But it was too late. The dog launched himself at the base of the painting. His teeth clamped down. The canvas tore with a violent rip, the sound sharp and final. Behind it, metal, a small rusted handle embedded in what should have been a concrete wall. But it wasn't concrete. It was steel. The kind of steel used to conceal something. The kind meant to last. Daniels rushed forward and yanked Dante back by the harness. The dog resisted briefly, then relented, sitting on his haunches, with his eyes fixed on the panel. He was no longer growling, just waiting. The room was still for a moment, stunned. Then Mrs. Carroll whispered, her voice shaking, "I didn't know that was there. I swear. That painting's been in my family since I was a child. My father gave it to me." Daniels believed her, mostly. But Dante didn't lie. He turned to a nearby student. "Get Principal Harding. Now." Within minutes, the school was buzzing. Classrooms emptied. Whispers raced through the halls. Had the dog gone crazy? Was there a bomb? A gas leak? Drugs Officer Daniels remained behind, standing guard over the shredded canvas and the hidden handle. Mrs. Carroll sat at her desk, hands trembling, staring at the ruin of her father's painting. The overhead speakers crackled. "All classrooms are to remain in lockdown until further notice. This is not a drill." Whatever was behind that wall wasn't just storage space. An hour later, the bomb squad arrived. They scanned the room, inspected Dante's behavioral logs, and pried open the panel with magnetic tools and handheld scanners. With a creak and a groan, the door gave way. A cold gust of stale air surged into the classroom. Behind the wall lay a hidden room, small, no bigger than a walk-in closet sealed off from time. The air smelled untouched, like decades of dust and antiseptic. Inside were rusted filing cabinets, a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and stacked folders marked with red stamps. Confidential. Department of Defense. Daniels crouched beside Dante, who now sat calmly still, watching, like a soldier standing watch. What had begun as a growl was now something far larger, something waiting to be remembered. The hallway outside room 114 buzzed with nervous chatter when the district superintendent arrived, accompanied by two plainclothes investigators from the State Department of Education. No one used the word cover-up, not yet. but the way they avoided eye contact said enough. Inside the classroom, the air hung heavy. The torn canvas lay crumpled beneath Mrs. Carroll's easel, its once patriotic imagery now in pieces. Dante stayed near the opening, still and silent, as though guarding a tomb. Principal Harding returned, flashlight in hand, trying to smile. "We're going to keep this quiet for now. Tell the parents the dog picked up mold. Or a rodent." Daniels didn't answer. He just shined his light into the cavity. The room extended farther than expected, 6 feet inward, tiled in that familiar, outdated 1970s linoleum. The smell was faint, but clinical. "You ever seen anything like this?" he asked one of the bomb squad technicians. "Nope," the man replied. "And I'll tell you something else, your dog didn't hit on explosives. Whatever set him off, it wasn't a bomb." They opened the first cabinet. Folders, dozens of them. Some marked with student names, others labeled with cryptic terms like Project, TS, Unit 14, Debrief Echo. All stamped with red confidential. Dep T. of Defense. Harding stepped back. "This doesn't make any sense. This is a middle school." But it wasn't always. According to the city records Daniels pulled up on his tablet, Lincoln Middle had once been a Cold War-era Air Force administrative building, purchased and converted into a school in 1983. But the files suggested parts of the original structure were never demolished. Someone had sealed off a room, then hidden it behind a painting. For over 30 years, no one had known. No one until Dante. Daniels stood brushing dust off his uniform. "Call in the archivist, and someone needs to talk to Mrs. Carroll. Again." Down the hallway, the nurse's office was dim and quiet, a world apart from the chaos unfurling elsewhere. Mrs. Carroll sat on the edge of a cot, clutching a paper cup of water in trembling hands. Her cheeks were pale, her eyes swollen and wet. Officer Daniels entered gently, his presence softening at the sight of her. "I didn't know," she said again, before he could speak. "I swear, officer, that painting, my father gave it to me when I graduated college. He never talked about his work. Said art was his way of remembering things he couldn't say." Daniels sat beside her. "Do you know where he got it?" She shook her head. "He was stationed somewhere in Europe in the 70s. I always thought it was just a tribute, something symbolic." Her gaze drifted. "He once told me some truths are better painted than spoken. I didn't understand then. Maybe now I do." Back in room 114, one of the state investigators waved Daniels over. "You might want to see this." Inside one of the folders labeled Echo Documents, they found a map, hand-drawn, faded and meticulously detailed. It showed the school grounds as they stood today. But underneath the familiar floor plan was another set of markings: tunnels, chambers, hidden access points. Unrecorded, unknown to the district. One tunnel in particular led from beneath room 114 toward the town's power plant. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" the investigator asked. "Yeah," Daniels said quietly. "This wasn't a storage room. It was operational." As if in response to that realization, Dante growled again. Low, subtle, but sharp enough to draw every eye in the room. He wasn't staring at the cabinets this time. He was watching the floor. Daniels followed his gaze. There, near the far wall, the linoleum was off-color, uneven. He knelt, brushed away a thin layer of dust, and ran his fingers along a faint seam. "Hand me the crowbar." The team pried it open. Underneath was a narrow opening and a metal ladder leading down into darkness. Everyone froze. "This keeps going," Principal Harding whispered. Apparently Daniels replied, grabbing a flashlight. "I'm going down." He paused at the edge, looking to Dante. "And he's coming with me." The descent was slow and tense. The ladder creaked with age. The air grew colder, denser, until they reached the bottom, a smaller chamber, windowless and still. Along the walls, broken monitors, a row of dead switches, and a shelf filled with reels of magnetic tape. Daniels clicked on his body cam. He picked up one of the boxes. It was labeled Subject 9, Initiation Protocol, 1975. Beneath that, in faded ink, property of Lieutenant Colonel H. Carroll Daniels, breath caught. Mrs. Carroll's father. The pieces were falling together, but none of it made sense. Not yet. They didn't play the tape. They needed proper equipment. But even without sound, Daniels knew they had stumbled into something meant to stay buried. And Dante the dog who had barked at a painting had been the first to listen. The following morning, Lincoln Middle School was eerily silent. Not in the sleepy early bell way schools often are, but hushed, like a building holding its breath. Room 114 was sealed. 2 sheriff's deputies stood guard outside the doorway, yellow caution tape stretched across it, like a line between the present and a truth long hidden. Daniels hadn't slept. He'd spent the night watching Dante pace their living room. The dog had that look again, ears up tail, low alert, restless, haunted. Daniels had seen it before back when they were deployed. It meant the job wasn't done. And in his gut, Daniels knew this was just the beginning. At 7:12 a.m., he stood outside the one place in Fairhaven that might still own a functioning reel-to-reel player. Miller's Vinyl and Audio, a cluttered shop tucked between a boarded bakery and a nail salon. Wes Miller, the Vietnam vet who ran the place, opened early for him. "You're lucky I never throw anything away," Wes said, patting a silver-faced machine with reverence. "What are we listening to?" Daniels hesitated. "Something hidden for nearly 50 years. Not sure it's even legal." Wes just smiled. "Son, I've seen worse." Hit play. The machine spun, static. Then a clipped military voice. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Harold Carroll. Subject 9 has completed primary adjustment. Cognitive retention is above expected thresholds. Conditioning has taken hold." Pause. "Today we begin the integration process. If successful, Subject 9 will become the first viable candidate for permanent embedded memory suppression. Objective long-term disassociation from operative history." The next voice was younger, shaky, a child. "I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go home. Please." "Can I talk to my dad?" "Proceed with cycle reset," came the colonel's cold command. The tape cut out, silence except for the hiss of static. Daniels sat still. Embedded memory suppression. Integration process. Subject 9. He turned to Wes. "Can you copy this?" Wes nodded solemnly. "On it." Outside, Daniels called Principal Harding. "We've got more than Cold War junk. This was human experimentation. And if I'm right, Subject 9 might have been a child." Harding's voice cracked. What does that mean for us?" Daniels stared into the rising sun. "It means someone used this school as a testing ground. And the person who painted that mural may have been trying to either cover it up or expose it." By the time Daniels returned to campus, a mobile FBI lab was parked in the staff lot. Technicians were mapping the chamber dusting prints, scanning tapes. But one thing they couldn't find: any official record of Subject 9. No birth date, no social security, no real name. But they found something else. In the drawer of an old desk, buried beneath layers of dust, lay a small silver locket. Inside, a black and white photo of a girl maybe 10 years old and a man in uniform. Daniels brought it to Mrs. Carroll. When she opened it, her hand flew to her mouth. "That's me," she whispered. "And that's my father. I remember this photo. I lost it when I was little." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Ma'am, we think you might have been here, in that room. Subject 9. Might have been you." She sat down slowly. "That can't be," she said, but her voice trailed off. "I remember growing up overseas. Art school, my mom's apartment in Germany. I remember." But fragments began to unravel, images, gaps, flickers of a tiled floor and a clipboard, of cold metal and fluorescent lights. "I always had nightmares," she whispered, "about being underground, locked in. I thought it was just childhood fear." Her hands shook. "Are you saying my own father did this to me?" Daniels didn't answer, but his silence said enough. Dante stood again at the edge of room 114. No growling, no barking, just stillness, as if he knew the secrets behind the torn wall were still breathing, as if he was guarding something sacred. That night, Daniels returned to the tunnels. This time, not alone. The FBI's forensic team was with him, mapping, measuring, and photographing every surface. Deep within the earth beneath the school, they uncovered 3 more hidden compartments, each filled with similar relics: old audio tapes, rusted metal boxes, black and white photos of unnamed children. Daniels watched in silence as the agents unearthed each piece of evidence. Each artifact felt like an echo, distant, but insistent, demanding to be heard. This wasn't a Cold War relic. This was a chapter erased from history. 3 days later, the story broke. Headlines splashed across national news. Secret government experiments uncovered in Oregon school. Dog uncovers Cold War, human testing site. Fair Haven erupted. Parents stormed the school board office. Protesters gathered at the gates. Local news vans lined the curb, where school buses once dropped off sleepy kids. And amidst the outrage, one image began to circulate. Dante standing before the shredded painting, American flag still visible in the background, eyes forward, as if staring down time itself. He didn't hold a weapon. He didn't speak a word. But somehow, he'd told a truth no one else had dared touch. The following Monday, the school remained closed. Flags flew at half-staff, not for a fallen soldier, but for the ghosts beneath its floors. Inside his apartment, Daniels sat at the kitchen table, eyes bleary from sleepless nights, flipping through one of the newly declassified files. Dante lay curled at his feet, tail twitching every time the refrigerator buzzed or a car passed. The file in his hands was stamped Operation Silent Brush Timeline, 1974 to 1977. It wasn't a code name Daniels had ever heard before, but as he read through the case logs, training protocols, and psychological evaluation summaries, something clicked. The mural, the very one Dante tore down, hadn't been random. The swirling grays, the layered reds, the jagged brushstrokes, and subtle sepia tones, they weren't just artistic choices. They were signals, visual triggers. A form of covert psychological programming developed by military intelligence units, designed to evoke suppressed memories in subjects conditioned through embedded trauma. Mrs. Carroll hadn't just hung a painting. She'd unknowingly brought the key to unlock her own past. By Tuesday morning, the FBI's mobile lab had digitized several of the tapes. Daniels sat in a dark corner of the command truck, headphones on, as the first tape played. Subject 09 continues to exhibit residual maternal attachment. Emotional suppression protocol unsuccessful. Recommend secondary chemical reset. Another voice. Male. Frantic. She's not stabilizing. The painting triggered hallucinations. Her work is becoming erratic. She's revealing too much. Daniels stopped the recording. His jaw clenched. They had tried to erase a child's identity, but what they hadn't counted on was that she would grow up to be an art teacher, that she'd return to the building where it all began, and that a dog would unravel the silence. Later that afternoon, Daniels visited her. She hadn't returned to work. Her small cottage at the edge of town was quiet, sun-dappled, filled with the smell of paint and old wood. She didn't meet him at the door. She was at the window, painting directly on the glass blue swirls and yellow streaks, like a child might. "I can't sleep," she said, not turning. "Every time I close my eyes, I see tunnels, faces, a girl. But I don't know who she is." Daniels stepped closer. "You were never supposed to remember." She nodded. "Do you think he regretted it?" she asked. "My father." Daniels hesitated, then pulled something from his jacket, a red envelope. They had found it locked in a false-bottom drawer in the chamber beneath room 114. The handwriting on the front was simple, almost gentle. "For MC, when the world is ready." She opened it slowly. Inside was a 2-page handwritten letter. She read it in silence at first, then aloud. "My sweet Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm already long gone. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. They told me I was protecting the country, that I was shielding the truth from the wrong hands. but they never told me the cost. I thought I could protect you by hiding it all, by giving you a painting instead of an explanation. Maybe truth doesn't want to be buried. Maybe it wants to be painted. I hope one day you'll find the strength I never had. You always loved blue the most. Dad. Her tears came quietly trailing down her cheeks, pooling at the corner of her mouth. Daniel said nothing. There was nothing to say. Sometimes, silence is the only language truth respects. That week, the school board held an emergency town hall meeting. The auditorium was packed. Parents, teachers, students, local media. Daniels was there in uniform. Dante sat at his side, dignified, alert. The board chair took the mic. We've made the decision to permanently seal room 114. The documents will be turned over to the Federal Archives. But we understand. This isn't an end. It's the beginning of a story that was never meant to be told. A student raised their hand. Is it true? A dog found it all. Daniels glanced at Dante, who sat poised like a statue. It's true, he said. Dante didn't just bark at a painting. He barked at history, at memory, at a truth no one wanted to face. And somehow, he knew. The room broke into quiet applause. Not loud, not thunderous, just honest, respectful. Later that evening, Daniels uploaded a video to the Heroes for Animals channel. The title read, K9 Dog Uncovers Secret Hidden in School Wall. What he found changed everything. He hit publish, then turned to Dante. Ready for what's next, partner? Dante thumped his tail once on the floor. A silent yes. 2 weeks passed. By then, Dante's story had gone viral. The tale of a canine who uncovered Cold War-era secrets buried beneath a middle school classroom captivated the nation. News anchors dubbed it the bark that broke the silence. Talk shows called Dante a national treasure. And for a brief, strange moment, Fairhaven, Oregon became the center of the country's attention. But Officer Daniels wasn't watching the news. He was sitting alone in a folding chair in the back corner of a makeshift FBI archival center, formerly the town's library, surrounded by dusty boxes and bundled reels of unmarked tape. Most of the original documents had already been shipped to Washington, but a few outliers had slipped through the cracks left behind in janitorial closets, forgotten under floorboards, or mixed with abandoned school supplies. One of those outliers was a file labeled simply Subject 10. Daniels opened it slowly, heart already heavy with what he suspected he'd find. Inside, a grainy photo of a girl around 8 years old. Dark curls, large solemn eyes that stared into the camera with eerie stillness. At the top of the page, 841010. Beneath it, scribbled in shaky pen, no known relatives. Final cycle incomplete. Status disappeared. Daniels stared at the image. She looked different than Maggie Carroll, but the same weight rested in her gaze, like she had once carried something no child ever should. He flipped the page. There was only one more note, barely legible on carbon copy paper. Last seen near Southfield Orphanage, 1982. Dog reported disturbance. Entry denied. Case closed. A dog. It always came back to the dogs. Across the room, Agent Beach, the FBI's on-site lead, walked over, holding another small box of reel-to-reel tapes. She stopped when she saw his face. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said. Daniels handed her the folder. Maybe I have. Beach scanned it, exhaled. We didn't think there were more. If this is real, Daniels said, then Subject 9 wasn't the only one. And Subject 10? She's still missing. Beach lowered herself into the chair beside him, glancing down at Dante, who lay at Daniels's feet, eyes open, ears twitching. You ever think maybe these dogs remember something? She asked, like they were trained for more than we knew. Daniels looked at his partner. He remembered their first mission together, a warehouse sting in San Jose. How Dante had pulled him by the collar out of the path of a collapsing steel beam. No command had been given, no prior training for rescue instincts like that. Just action, pure and precise. Let's say they do, Daniels said softly. Then the real question is, What are we still not seeing that Friday? Miss Carroll returned to Lincoln Middle School. Not to teach. She'd taken an indefinite leave. But she came bearing a painting. It wasn't like the last one. No hidden messages, no encoded trauma. This one was soft, abstract again, but warm. Swirls of blue, gentle whites, and golden accents layered like healing winds. She asked that it be hung in the cafeteria. For the kids, she said. Daniels met her afterward near the staff lot. She seemed lighter. Not healed grief like hers never heals quickly, but steadier, as if naming her truth had loosened the grip of something buried deep. I've been dreaming of her, she said without prompting. The girl in the second file. I see her in my sleep, always hiding, always afraid. And there's a dog with her, not Dante, a border collie, black and white. Daniels felt the hair rise on his arm. She might be real, he said. We found a file. There's no record of her after 1982. Mrs. Carroll didn't flinch. She simply looked past him toward the open field behind the school, where a few kids were playing soccer. We should look for her, she said. Daniels nodded. We will. That night, Daniels returned to his patrol route. Fairhaven was quiet again, but not the same. The streets felt different now, charged as if every alleyway or abandoned house held its breath, as if the past was still watching. Dante sat shotgun as always, alert, watching too. Halfway down Main Street he shifted, ears forward, nose twitching, a low whine in his throat. What is it? Daniels asked. They were passing the Southfield lot, where the orphanage had once stood before it burned. The place now occupied by an empty strip mall, with cracked pavement and faded signs. Daniels pulled over. Dante jumped out before the car fully stopped zigzagging across the lot, nose to the ground, tail stiff. Then he stopped, sat, stared at a manhole cover near the corner of the lot. Daniels approached slowly, flashlight in hand. The area looked abandoned, forgotten. But beside the manhole, etched faintly into the cement, was a marking 841T2010. Daniels crouched, brushed his fingers over the numbers. Not a street address, a designation. The same code from the Subject 10 file. She had been here. And maybe, just maybe, she still was. Daniels didn't sleep that night. He filed the report, called Agent Beach, marked the site for excavation. It would take permits, ground radar, days of waiting. But in his gut he knew this wasn't over. At 2:43 a.m., he poured himself another cup of coffee and glanced at Dante, who was staring out the window tail, thumping gently. Daniels followed his gaze. Across the street, standing barefoot on the sidewalk beneath a flickering streetlight, was a girl. Older now, weathered, wrapped in a hoodie. She didn't wave, didn't move. But Daniels recognized her face, the same one from the photo in Subject 10's file. And beside her, a black and white dog stood perfectly still, as if on guard. Then, like mist, they were gone. Dawn arrived, slow and muted. The sky over Fairhaven held that fragile gray before sunrise, streaked with soft orange and pale gold. Daniels stood on his front steps, coffee in hand, Dante by his side, both watching the stillness. Neither had spoken a word, not that either needed to. By 9:00 a.m., the FBI's ground team had set up at the Southfield lot. Technicians unspooled cables and calibrated equipment. A section near the manhole was cordoned off. Agent Beach stood nearby, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. 20 minutes in, one of the techs raised a hand. Hollow space detected 10 feet down, roughly the size of a small room. Beach nodded. Start digging. By mid-afternoon, the top layer of concrete had been removed, revealing reinforced steel beneath. There were no locks, no hinges, as if whoever sealed it never meant for it to be reopened. But with effort and a crowbar, it gave way. Inside was a small chamber, bare walls, rusted filing cabinets, stale air that hadn't been disturbed in decades. But it was the far wall that froze Daniels in place. A mural, childlike in form, clumsy in color, painted by a hand too small to fully understand what it was expressing. Figures: a girl, a dog, a gate, and above them, scratched in uneven black paint, Eddie. Daniels stepped inside. On a dusty shelf, he found a journal. Its pages were thin, ink faded, but still legible. They called me 10. They said I didn't have a name, but I did. I just forgot it. The dog remembered, though. He never left. I hear him sometimes, even when the lights go out. I think he's the only part of me they couldn't erase. The final page had been torn, but on the inside cover, scrawled in rushed handwriting, were 3 words: still watching, still here. News of the discovery broke that night. Second Cold War experiment. Bunker found in Fairhaven. Survivor may have been identified, but this time the town didn't panic. They gathered. Candlelight vigils bloomed outside the school and later at the Southfield site. Former students of Mrs. Carroll shared memories of her art class, how it had always felt safe, even before they understood why. Artists across the country began recreating her style: swirls of blue and yellow, scattered with images of children and dogs. Her trauma had become a bridge, and from it, healing had begun. Then came the call. A woman in Idaho had seen the story. She ran a rescue ranch for retired service dogs, and 11 years ago, a black and white border collie had appeared starving, terrified and unwilling to respond to anything. Except one word: Finn. The same name etched beneath the mural. The dog was still alive. They brought him to Fairhaven. When Mrs. Carroll saw him, she knelt without a word. The dog walked straight to her, laid his head gently on her knee, and closed his eyes. Dante stood a few feet away, tail swaying gently, as if saluting. The school's east wing was never reopened. Instead, it became a memorial. The room between walls. Not a museum of war, not an academic hall of fame, but a gallery of memory. Children from across the country sent in their art images of pain, of recovery, of truth uncovered. Mrs. Carroll's newest piece hung at the center. It showed 2 dogs, Dante and Finn, standing at the edge of a forest. In the background, a school, a girl's shadow, and a door finally open. Daniels never went back to regular patrol. He became a community liaison officer, teaching kids about safety, trust, and courage, and how sometimes the most important voices aren't human. And Dante, he became a legend. A dog without rank or medal, but with instincts honed not by command, but by loyalty. His bark had changed more lives than 1,000 speeches ever could. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of night, Daniels still looked toward that same corner of the street. He never saw the barefoot girl again, but he knew she was out there, if not in body, then in memory, etched forever into the town's foundation. And when he closed his eyes, he always heard it: a soft bark, a scratch on metal, and a whisper only the broken-hearted could understand. Remember. Because truth has a strange way of surfacing. Sometimes it takes decades, sometimes it takes a child, and sometimes it takes a dog.